All right, everybody. My name is Bhavin Sidhu, and I will be the moderator for the panel this afternoon. I'm going to introduce myself really quickly, just a couple quick things, and then I'm going to have Leslie Doka introduce herself, and then Jill, maybe you can give a quick recap. So yeah, my name is Bhavin Sidhu. For my day job, I am the general manager for Lafarge's operations here in Saskatchewan. We have about 250, 260 employees. We're both in Saskatoon and Regina, and we have about 22 active sites right now. I'm 20 years in the industry, and over the last 10, I've been focused on leadership, specific around people and projects. And then for my hobby, I am the host for Our Work podcast. It's a podcast that highlights the stories of local leaders here in Saskatoon that I feel like are making an impact and doing really interesting work. Some of those leaders are in the room here today, which is kind of cool. And it's a podcast about leadership in business. And for the purposes of both the podcast and this panel, I use the term leadership quite broadly. So I'm talking about at work, whether you have the title or not, you have the ability to lead, which is to kind of support the people around you and create some clarity. And then at home, if you have some little people at home or some not so little people anymore, you are also leading as a parent, probably in one of the most humbling and difficult leadership roles that I've ever experienced personally. So there's that. So that's a little bit about me. Leslie?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Leslie Doka, and I am the Director of Construction at a general contractor. Our head office is here in Saskatoon. We've been operating in the province for over 120 years. In our general contracting business, we build buildings. So for a long time, we did a lot of commercial space, a lot of retail space, and now we're more focused into, other than Amazon, we're still doing work for Amazon. We're focused on schools and hospitals, and that's the type of construction that we do. I love the topic of today of resilience. I think that being in the contracting business takes a lot of resilience, and I'm excited about our conversation today. I grew up in a small, just a little bit about me, I grew up in a farm in southwest Saskatchewan, third generation farm. So from a very young child, I was helping out on the farm and learning how to work hard. Watching your parents and grandparents farm. Are any of you from farming or agricultural backgrounds? Yep, a few more than scuba diving. It's hard work and it's unpredictable work. And you've got to plan correctly and work really hard, and it doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does. So after I left home, I went to college and started my career in structural design and drafting. I wasn't that great at it, but it was a great environment to learn in. Once I got a little bit more experienced, they let me go to the job site. And I got to go there and do some progress reports and inspections. I love that. I'm like, that is what I'm interested in. That is what I want to do. So in 2004, I joined Wright, and we were very small back then, so I helped the boss do whatever he needed to do. Eventually got into a more project coordinator role, and then I spent quite a few years in a project management role. And I've worked on projects anywhere from $100,000 to $700 million. So we do a large variety of types of work and sizes of work. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to this.
So very briefly, because this audience has already had an hour-long introduction into my life, but I know this is for a podcast too. So I am Jill Heinerth. I am a full-time underwater explorer in residence of the Royal Canadian Geographical Society, and I work in dark places like caves.
Dark, cold, small, very scary places. Okay, so I also love the theme of this conference, resilient project leadership. I think it's so important always, but very much so today. So I personally believe that when things get a little bit tough, when things become challenging, whether at home or at work, in this setting projects, it's very important to get clear on your why. What is the motivation for the work that you're doing, right? I think that getting clear on the why kind of gives you that desire, that motivation to kind of keep on moving and keep kind of persevering through. So for those of you that are kind of reflecting on your why, one thing I did want to say, a very acceptable why is I need this job. Or this job is a stepping stone to do the job that I really want to do or the type of projects I really want to work on. Totally acceptable. But I wanted to understand a little bit about, maybe we'll start with you, Leslie, like why construction, why projects, why this type of work?
Yeah, I think that construction gives continuous new challenges and a lot of change. There's always new problems to solve, and you don't see a lot of things twice due to just the nature of the changing projects. And even if you're building the same project, there's different people involved. So it's a very different environment every time. So I am the type of individual, I get bored very easily, and I love the continuous change. It also can be a bit of a turbulent environment, and I do thrive and am energized by a chaotic environment. There's a lot of personalities and perspectives in construction, and it's just a wonderful challenge to bring people together. And there's a lot of creative problem solving in construction. It's very technical work, but usually when it comes to the people and the teams and the communication, there can be a lot of creativity, and that's fun for me. So.
Yeah, I'm still that little kid in kindergarten that's playing show and tell, I think. But the truth of the matter is, you and I, and probably most of the people in this room, are actually genetically driven to do this kind of work. So there's a genetic description, the DR4 7R allele, which is shortened as the 7R gene. It's the adventure seeker's gene. We seek novelty, new sensations. We want to solve problems. You know, if we go for a walk every day, we probably go for a different route every time. We eat something different on the menu every time we go to a restaurant. And we would have been the hunter-gatherers in ancient civilization, whereas the majority of the population are actually genetically geared for being the people at home, you know, growing the crops and taking care of the family. So probably in this room, there's an uneven balance of genetically driven reasons for why we take on the work of curiosity, problem solving, risk management, and all of that.
There's some house music playing?
Yeah.
Okay, not just me. Okay, and I think you might have answered this for me, Jill, but I'm going to ask it in a slightly different way. So although I think it's important to, like, the type of industry or the type of work that we do, in doing the podcast and having conversations with people that are doing work at a very high level, I'm realizing that the how is almost just as important as the why. And when I say how, it's the how you show up in every aspect of your life, at home and work and all the different spaces. It's kind of like a special talent or gift that everybody innately has in them. If I had to make an assumption about a lot of the folks in this room, I would assume that a lot of you are very masterful at taking a lot of complex, big details and synthesizing it in a concise way in order to move a project forward towards execution. So that might be kind of one of my little guesses to the how you show up in a lot of spaces in your life. Leslie, maybe I'll start with you. What's your how?
I think that, and it wasn't clear to me when I started in this field, but the big picture, where we're going, what we're trying to create, the big picture is always clear to me. I don't get lost in the details. Seeing priorities in the sea of information and, you know, plucking out that one thing that'll make the difference that we can work with to turn a problem or a project around. What needs to be relevant, what's tackled. I'm good at that part. I'm not good at sorting and organizing the details, but I am good at helping that big picture. I had mentioned in my introduction, I did start out at a structural engineering firm, and my job there was detailing structure. And the reason and I didn't understand it at the time, but the reason I wasn't good at it, it's like you're balancing millimeters, right? And you're getting things precise. This is what engineering design and drafting requires of us. So once I moved on to construction, once again, the first 5 years of my career, I dived into the details. You got to have the technical know-how and understand the technical pieces of project management, and in my case, the technical pieces of construction and building science. So it wasn't until well into that I learned that seeing the big picture was going to benefit me. But it did eventually come out, and now I think it's helped me where I've got to, and I can help other people with that skill.
Yeah, for me, I think open-minded optimism would be how I would describe myself. Like, I have to believe that what I'm working on is possible, but it might be through very unconventional means and ways, and I think further than that, I also feel like I need to be an igniter. So, recently I had someone approach me and say, we really want you to be the science director for this project in Indonesia. We need your expertise. And I'm like, no, can't do, but I don't have the time in my schedule, but I can advise you because you too are capable of this job. You just don't know it yet, and I'll help you get there. So I think open-mindedness, but also, helping others to fulfill what's possible for them is important in how I do things.
And for you, Jill, like, you're at that place now. Was that different than when the beginning, when you first started your diving journey?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, life was quite different when I started my journey. First, I didn't have people to look up to. I mean, when I decided I wanted to be an underwater explorer, it was the pre-internet era, too, so we didn't have these kinds of connections, access to collaborations that we do today. I mean, I literally sold everything I owned, moved to the Cayman Islands, had to print my pictures from film and mail them off with stories to magazines around the world, and then wait months to get rejected. But also there were no women in my space either, so I was always constantly trying to seek out the mentors. Today that's a lot easier, but it does take initiative. Like, we have access to the world's knowledge, we have access to each other, but you do have to overtly go ask for the gig or ask for the connection. And yeah, so a lot's changed.
So when you shared that you were in advertising, and then this was the pivot that you made, Leslie and I looked at each other and our jaws kind of dropped, and we're like, oh, maybe it's not too late for us now. But can you just talk to us a little bit about that pivot? Like, did you have clarity right away as to where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do? Because when you talk about, the creative piece aligned for you, but it wasn't the right environment.
Right.
But to go from understanding that to seeing that this was your path, talk about that.
Yeah, so I was teaching scuba nights and weekends, and I just one day sort of reflected, and I thought, okay, I'm killing myself. I'm a workaholic. I'm killing myself at this drafting table, and all I want to do is go teach someone to dive or go up to Tobermory for the weekend and go diving. And that was always driving me forward. I'm like, well, why am I doing this thing and not doing more of that? But it wasn't a momentary decision. It literally took me a couple of years because I had built a great business. It was successful. I had those, social cultural barriers to face. I mean, my own father wrote me a letter when I was 30 years old saying, hurry up, dear, you're running out of time, to have children, and when are you going to start doing something serious in life, that kind of thing. So there's those barriers, familial, cultural, whatever, gender barriers. But it was one day when I finally realized, like, I'm not going to be fooling myself unless I make this jump. And selling everything and selling the business was probably the best thing to do because there was sort of no choice but to succeed at that point. There was no turning back.
You burnt the boats.
I did.
Amazing, and it worked out quite well. It did. Okay. That kind of makes me want to go to fear, but we'll stick with the plan. So, thinking about the inception of projects and really defining project objectives and outcomes, right? Is that sounds like it's a very important step in both your world and construction. So maybe we'll start with you, Leslie. Can you just talk to us about the importance of that and what that process might look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the foundation of everything we do in project management and in our field in construction. Defining the results and the outcomes we want, it doesn't, in my experience, doesn't change in our industry from one company to the next. Part of the reason that I have stayed with Wright Construction is because there's all this overarching theme within our company of being people-focused. And construction is a people-driven business. I mean, we're not anything without our talent. So I was very thankful. Some examples of that, I guess, are valuing our clients in a different way. We value repeat clients. We look for clients that look for our value beyond our low bid dollar. We look for clients that we communicate with. We look for clients that we can collaborate with, that we feel in the end helps us make money and be successful. Employee development and retention. We think that focusing on our employees and the uniqueness and the unique talents that each employee brings to the business helps our own outcomes and helps our success. We help them build a career path, and one of the things that lacks in my industry is a work-life balance scenario. So we try our best to create that as best we can. You know, it's possible sometimes, and other times it's tough. But we do believe that a happy and engaged and balanced employee will help the business to succeed. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I do has one extra interesting step, and that's that we have to pre-visualize what a project might be, what the goals might be, what the deliverables might be. Then we have to go find money and so pitch it, whether, you know, if it's a TV program or a story for National Geographic or something. We have to, you know, get their buy-in on the concept of the project and the deliverables, but then we also have to convince them that A, we're going to be safe, that we've got the right, you know, protocols aligned. But inevitably what happens next is they say, well, what are you going to see? What's it look like? What's the inside of that iceberg look like? And I'm like, I have no idea. You know, I have no idea. I can't tell you what it's going to look like. And they're trying to picture what their movie or their TV program is going to look like. And I can't tell them. And I might actually come back with a completely different story that I'll have to sell afterwards. So the exploration component really changes things in a big way, because it also informs risk assessment and management and mitigation every single day as well.
Yeah, we have a defined goal, a much more defined goal to work with, for sure.
And like, I know in knowing you and after your presentation this morning, you both have dealt with projects that have gone south, that whether it's schedule or in your case, stakes are much higher. Can you just talk to me a little bit about how you managed that, and not just the actual project itself, but maybe some of your team and the people surrounding it when things go bad?
Yeah, that's the hardest, and yet we have to have very frank conversations, even in the planning, where it's like somebody could die, you know, and you have to plan for that too, right? Like, imagine in Woutla, the cave inside the mountain. In 1994, when my colleague was there, somebody died of a diabetic emergency inside the cave. And it took 12 days to recover the body and bring him out of the cave and deal with that situation. But the cave still needed to be de-rigged. So the expedition must go on, even after the loss of a teammate. And those are really hard conversations to have, you know, with the family, the loved ones, the expedition teammates, and it has to be like, I completely understand if anyone wants to go home, but we've got to do this for the sake of safety and cleaning up the mess kind of thing. So I think we're really honest about existential threats that we face, and it gets real when there's a dead guy on the deck, you know, and I say that because it reflects in everything that you do as well out there. I mean, that's when it really hits you that you know, your job is really important, and how you do it every day is really important. And not just designing those protocols, but sticking to them and finding a way for everybody else to stick with the best, you know, safety decisions is really important, because that's when it gets real.
Yeah, my answer didn't go towards the safety environment, but I think that construction does share the safety risk. I really related in your presentation to, you know, knowing what the safety protocol is and then being able to test it and perform it in a real life scenario. And I was thinking hard about maybe how we can do that better in our company. We do, you know, practical training, but it's not situational training in the way you described. I really love that. The other thing I really related to was that 9 times out of 10, the problem originates with something very simple. That is very true in what I do. Those basic foundational technical things we do, they're super important, and they have an impact if they're done wrong. They're not a life and death impact usually, but you have to get those basics right, and you have to get your technical stuff mastered before you can move on to that next level.
The performance pressure is huge. You know, whether you're trying to succeed in some new scientific discovery or whether you're just trying to get the next promotion, right? There's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of money riding on the line. There's a lot of pressure from above to have a success for a company. Yeah, those pressures are real, and I really think that knowing when to say no and knowing when to abort is an important strength that is underemphasized in business. Like, how do you think outside the box and push the company forward and make more money for the company, but how do you also say, oof, no, we're not doing that, or not today? It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, and I think that the risks we face when making those decisions are probably more contractual risk, financial risk, safety risk. Yeah, I agree.
I was just thinking, like, when you talk about, you know, you just got to get really clear and be ready to abort if need be. And I think that original exercise that we started with is getting clear on your why you're in it, why you're doing the thing. I think that's a really good exercise for, in our world at least, to say, okay, like, this doesn't align. I can't really figure out my why I'm doing this anymore. So maybe it's not the right thing to persevere and push on. Maybe you just don't need to be in that situation or that job or that project or whatever it might be, but it's that why kind of is the trigger point for the abort sometimes.
I remember one of my first colleagues in advertising, you know, we'd made a mistake on a project and it cost a bunch of money, and I remember him saying, okay, so you said we learned something from this? And I said, oh yeah, we learned a lot from this. He goes, okay, when are we going to stop learning, and when are we going to start making some money?
I think one of the other things that we face in our business is the lack of time. I think that our business is very, the expectations are, get started now, when are you going to be done, how fast can we do this? And I think that we could have a better balanced business on spending more time in the planning. We talk about the importance of it, we realize the importance of it. We don't often, the project conditions, I'll call them, don't allow for that time, even though the emphasis is there. I think safety, we do a good job in safety. We give time to safety, but I think we could carry that into other parts of our planning for our projects.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the culture, at least in the construction world, from my experience, is we'll just dive in and get it done. Yeah. Very just like that, we've always done it this way, so there's no really point in sitting here and planning and chatting about it. Let's just get to work. Yeah.
Why weren't you done yesterday? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, and so, you know, both of you are very seasoned, experienced leaders in your own individual spaces, right? So we talked a little bit about being a leader in all the different parts of your life. What does it mean to you? Like, what do you see as your role as a leader in your space?
Simple for me. Make myself replaceable. Find the next one who's going to fill my shoes, and empower them to do that so that I can step back and watch it happen.
Do you have a protege or someone you're working with?
I have lots of them around the world. Yeah, yeah. No, it's a really important thing for me with every project. Is that every participant in that project walks away knowing how to do all the different jobs, because that if you're a dive safety officer today and you're a scooter mechanic tomorrow and you're the overall expedition leader the next day, everybody has a better time. We have a better project. Everybody's much more informed about what's going on. And then they're all capable about being expedition leaders for the next one.
Just out of curiosity, those many proteges, a good blend of men and women, or?
I really focus on the women. No, I mean, my expedition colleagues are still primarily men, but I actively seek out women who need a little help up, because we're still such a minority in what I do, and you know, there are many other factors involved in a woman's life. Like a woman explorer may also need to find funding for health or for childcare so that she can get out in the field, kind of thing. So there's a lot of unique issues we have, and I certainly want to see a lot more women out there, because one thing you never hear a woman say in the field is, "Hey y'all, watch this." So yeah, I mean, I think women are really good team players, really honest about their personal limitations and their boundaries, and so I would like to see a more equitable field of explorers and image makers and underwater people in general.
To make a good team, you really need all of those things.
Yeah, actually, you know, I've had all women's teams. I've been the only woman on a boat, and I've had mixed teams. And actually, the mixed teams are the most productive.
Agreed. Yeah, much agreed. You know, I think being a good leader is maybe not as complicated as it sometimes can. We can buy hundreds of books on leaderships. We all know that, and we're told to read some and encouraged to read some. But I mean, I think that being supportive, I think that being a good listener, I think that having the courage to do in-the-moment coaching and not waiting until somebody's performance review. I think in my world, we're always talking about the problems. Take time to recognize the good things and celebrate the good things. I think that can be very powerful. I think that the leader's job, in my opinion, is to set the pace and help influence the environment. So you really have to reflect on your own actions and your own attitudes, you know, about everything, regardless how you're feeling that day, or, you know, biases you yourself might have about any given situation. I think, too, that we're here to, you know, provide clarity. And I like your comment about finding a protege or creating proteges. And I think that helping people understand what they're doing and what they need help to get to the clarity they need to execute in the moment, it's super important. And I think it's a gift if you can be able to give that to people.
Well said. Okay, so we're going to pivot a little bit away from maybe direct project talk and talk a little bit about fear. And so, Jill, in reading and listening to a lot of your content over the last little bit here and preparing for this afternoon, fear is just so apparent and such an obvious large factor in what you do. In reflecting on kind of my work and my life, the role that fear has played and likely continues to play, it's just not quite as obvious. So it took me a little minute to connect it. And yeah, mine can sing. So it took me a minute to connect it to my own experience. And I realized that fear for me is kind of, and I think it might be kind of the fear that a lot of people in this room experience as well too. It's the fear that kind of keeps us comfortable, keeps us stable, right? It's the fear of you don't want to make the wrong decision, so you don't make a decision at all. You don't want to ask the wrong question or have the wrong opinion, so you don't say anything at all, right? You don't want to start the podcast. You're scared to start the podcast because it's scary and what people might think, and you have to voice your opinions and put yourself out there, so you just don't do it for a period of time, right? I think that is really the type of fear that factors a lot of decisions and kind of is that low level, kind of always like, what if you fail? What if it doesn't work out? What if you're not accepted? So that's been my experience as I kind of reflected on it. Have you have a similar experience with fear?
I think took me a lot of reflection as well, because as I was reading your book, I'm like, what do I have to be scared about? Like, I'm not going to go to work and get trapped in a tiny little, I mean, I watch you swimming through those things, and it just, I can't even visualize myself doing that. But it took me a while as well. And of course, like earlier in my career, you know, I was the only woman in the room. I was a young project manager going into, you know, a meeting, and there was much more experienced people there than me. And, you know, that's low-level fear. You got to, you know, sum up the courage to go to the meeting and take on intimidating situations. But I kind of took fear from a different angle when I did some soul searching. Not achieving a goal or being able to help my team reach their goals. That's a fear of mine as a leader. Not having the influence or the knowledge to create the outcomes that are needed. I'm getting older. I fear I can't relate to the younger generations, and that happened a lot in my life. I had people that were older than me mentoring me, and I just felt they couldn't relate to me, and I struggled with that. So I want to be a good mentor and relate to different demographics, whether it's age or other things. So. Yeah, I'm getting stuck in my ways, you know, not being flexible, not be open to new ideas. Technology, that's a tough one for me. I had to admit that. Looking at the agenda for today, I have to be more open to those things. So that's what I think of in my life about fear.
And Jill, like, I feel like you have been, and maybe it started when you transitioned from advertising to diving. I'd be curious, but when did you become, from the outside looking in, it feels like you've been very intentional that you wanted to conquer the fear. At what point did that start, and how did you even start?
I think I've always been a stubborn person, a stubborn kid. But like almost everybody in this room, there's a certain amount of imposter syndrome we all feel, or a lack of self-confidence. And that's all fear that holds us back from achieving things. And maybe, you know, as a woman just about to turn 60 now, I have some of that wisdom of the years where I go, oh yeah, that's just little stuff. Don't worry about that. So I suppose my outlook has changed. It seemed to be much more acute when I was younger, you know, performance pressures, you know, fear of taking that big leap, and, you know, what if I'm not successful? And I think now I'm just able to look back and say, yeah, the good, the bad, the ugly, the terrifying, the failures, all that stuff, the embarrassments that I might not be proud of, those were just things that built who I am today. And obviously I needed to have those experiences to build this wisdom. And so I've kind of just let go of a lot of that. And I'm just a lot more relaxed about being willing to make a mistake, or being willing to say, I don't know, but let me see if I can figure it out. So yeah, I guess it's been a slow build of confidence to overcome the fears.
And did the resilience come as you've faced every fear and conquered it and moved on, or have you always been a resilient person?
I think I've always been pretty resilient. My husband says, my God. He goes, you could deal with pain and discomfort. And I invite him on my expeditions, and he'll say, okay, describe to me like how you're sleeping, you know, like in a cot on the ice or whatever. And I feel like, that sounds too much like boot camp, you know, but I kind of thrive in those experiences. Always have.
Leslie, your relationship with resilience?
Yeah, I think I'm a resilient person. I think that anybody working in construction and project management has some level of, you know, our job is to deal with challenges. Why are project managers needed? Well, because things don't go as planned. Somebody needs to make a plan, right? So I think that, you know, by definition, I'm a resilient person. I think the key individual for me, the key factor for me in being resilient is not being bored. I think that once I'm bored, I do complain, and I'm kind of like a wimp about things. So, you know, as long as I'm continuously learning and I'm motivated, then I'm I think pretty motivated and happy to tackle the problem and be resilient.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our time. I was just curious if either of you had anything you wanted to add about projects, resilience, fear.
Well, you know, I think in reflection to that last question, I think team resilience happens when people have agency in the outcome. So whether that's, you know, building your replacement and giving them not just responsibility, but authority too, like giving them a stake in the results, it builds resilience for everybody, and I think that's really important.
I like that. I'm good.
You're good? Okay, I think we're going to open up to questions. Both Jill and Leslie told me when I was preparing questions for the panel that nothing is off limits. So I would encourage you all to dig deep for those good questions.
There we go. Yeah, if anyone's got questions here. And I can maybe start one off here. Jill, for your career, at what point, talking about fear, are you going to realize or come to the terms that, okay, I can't do this anymore, and how are you going to transition out of that?
Yeah, I think I've already been transitioning to a degree. I mean, the picture on the front of my book is a place that I discovered back in the 90s. But I also had a very serious diving accident there that almost ended my career. And I took the picture for the front of the book just to, always remind me of my mortality. So certainly since then, that diving accident made me a better diver and a more careful diver. And there's a lot more expeditions that I say no to today that I might have jumped on earlier in life just because I really wanted to do it. Yeah.
Any questions? Oh, we got one in the middle here.
Hello. So my question was, when we talk about challenges, there are like tangible challenges and intangible challenges. So what I mean by intangible is the environment around us, right? Construction can be hard physically, and so can scuba diving. But intangible challenges can be people and the way they talk and sometimes the judgments that they pass. So have you guys ever experienced such judgments or like negative comments from people around you, or have you always had supporters around you?
I'm 5'4", I'm Indian, and I'm a woman, and I came up in construction. So I might be able to answer that one a little bit, although I'm sure you two can as well, right? I think anytime, and it's no judgment of the people that were in my environment early days. I was very lucky. I would say I had 80% very supportive people around me that were just like, if I'm adding value, they didn't care. But there was that 20%, and of the 20%, maybe half of those were kind of quiet, and then half of those were very vocal, whether they had the courage to be vocal to my face or behind my back. You kind of get a vibe when you walk in a room, right? I think for me, there was two things. One, I went through this period early on where I was like, well, you're just judging me because you think I don't know anything. So let me show you what I know, because that's going to change your opinion and make you a little bit of a kinder person to me. And then I realized, no, that's not going to do it, right? So that was kind of my beginning journey. Here at the end of it now, I would say, I think you just have to be very clear and just always remind yourself their judgments have literally nothing to do with you. It's all about themselves and kind of their limitations and their views and what they think a manager should look like, what they think somebody in construction should look like, what they think a feminine woman's limitations are. So I think like just always, always, always remind yourself that it's them, it's not you. Don't let that get into you, and just make sure you have really good friends around you that will mirror the same information right back to you.
Yeah, one of the questions we didn't get to was about leadership being lonely. And in thinking through that question, I actually feel less lonely as a leader as when I was starting out, for many of the same reasons. Unfortunately, it's just not... It's getting better, but I think it's just not an industry 20 or 25 years ago that, I was the only woman in the room for many of those things. So, and I did, for most part, have really good people that supported me, but unfortunately there are people out there that don't want to support someone who looks different than them. So I did have that, but I think now as a leader, that's part of what really drives me is to create a diverse team and to make people feel included and connect with those people on what they're interested. I mean, you know what? We all have businesses and you have water cooler conversation, right? Everybody meets in the lunchroom and talking about the sports on the weekend. Well, if you're not into sports, how do you feel, right? And my boss was really great at that. He would seek out that person at the water cooler conversation at coffee in the morning and, talk to them and ask them what they were interested in. Oh, they were really interested in cross-country skiing and downhill skiing. And he would make an active effort in a month or 2 months to go ask them about their skiing and what they have planned for activities. There's that smallest connection. We can all do that, and it has great impact. So I know it's a little bit off topic of your question, but once again, I think these simple things can really help with the intangible things when it comes to the challenges.
But that's a good point, right? Like, as much as that one person can bring down your energy, you also can walk into that same room and be a leader and change the energy in a positive way, right? Be more inclusive. So one can take you down and one can bring you up.
Hi, just on the theme of resilience today, I was wondering if you guys could comment a little bit on debriefing or lessons learned within your guys' context. And just a second question just for Jill. I'm just curious, for every minute of diving, how much preparation goes before that? Have you done a calculation?
Yeah, a lifetime of preparation in so many ways. I mean, some projects have been on the burner for years before they actually come to fruition, and it's really the training and dedication from a lifetime that brings me to a place like that. Yeah.
Do you want lessons learned specifically? Yeah, I think lessons learned, and I'm maybe going to answer this question in the context of a safety environment, but I think it applies whether you're looking at it any which way. I think out of every experience, every failed experience, every challenging experience, or every project that's gone well or task that's gone well, there's learnings. And the larger an organization or team, the more important it is to share lessons learned, right? So what we do, I'm thinking about Lafarge now, we have a key lesson review. And for literally every single person that has a medical incident, we have 6,000 employees in just Western Canada alone. And for every single stitch, sprained arm, anything that results in any type of medical incident, we will do a key lesson review where we talk about what happened in the incident, why we either didn't have a safe working procedure or we had a safe working procedure that failed. And that will be reviewed with every single general manager and operational leader for every single key lesson, right? So that's just maybe a safety specific environment, but I think sometimes, especially in this day and age where we have so much access to information outside of ourselves in the internet age, which has a lot of positives, but it's also a lot of negatives because we just have stuff coming at us all the time. I think in that environment, it is important to maybe tune out some of the external stuff, but focus on the internal lessons learned within your organization. Because I think, that stitch doesn't have to result in a stitch anywhere else in the same scenario across Western Canada if you can take the time as a leader to do a proper lesson reviewed.
I think I also, throughout my life, have been an instructor of technical diving too. And so debriefing from a dive or new skill is really important. And I find that a lot of my students feel an incredible amount of performance pressure because they want to do well in their class. And the first thing I tell them is, you are a much better diver than I'm ever going to get a chance to see because you're under a lot of pressure here. And you're taking this class because you're going to make mistakes. And I'm here to be your safety net right now. So there are dives that we're going to come back from, and the beginning of my briefing is going to be like, okay, you probably wouldn't have survived this situation if I wasn't with you, so let's discuss why. But just to take judgment out of it and just say, you're supposed to make mistakes. You're going to learn this. You're never going to forget it after a mistake like that.
The safest person on a job site is the person that just had the incident. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that we incorporate lessons learned in our company to address a couple different things. The talent gap is a problem in many industries. The shortage of trade workers to everywhere in between. So we've used lesson learned to try and build the gap on experience. I mean, we all know we can just gather so much valuable information and sensory, that doesn't feel right, that doesn't look right in our work by experience. But how do we support those people who don't have time for experience, or we're putting them in situations that are maybe a little bit above their experience levels? So we've incorporated a robust lessons learned communication pattern, I'll call it, and there's a little bit of a database where, each department within our company, we have a forum to share our lessons learned. And, they're categorized a bit so that if you say, oh, I'm doing this special vertical concrete, what can I find in the lessons learned on vertical concrete? Or I'm doing this risky safety activity, what can I find in the lessons learned on that specific safety, that specific task, and the safety risks associated with it. So that's one of the ways we're trying to bridge that gap and share that knowledge in a positive way. I think the other thing it does, it creates good accountability, and we can create something positive out of mistakes and misses and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a win-win.
Thank you. So all of you all have great examples of the things you've done around defeating fear and increasing resiliency, because you've done those things as personal journeys and things that you've experienced over the years through what you've been doing. On a team, I'd like maybe some comment on how do we encourage or bring team members along as well too on that journey to help them also build up their resiliency and also build up their fear busting, of eventually replacing. Eventually kind of stepping in for you.
I think that's a great question. I think that one thing I have learned, I've met a lot of leaders who have a one-size-fits-all kind of leadership approach. This is my style, or this is my approach, and I think that trying to meet the individual where they're at, whether it's with their knowledge or their behavior patterns or their fears or what they're trying to balance in their life, I think is the key to that. You got to learn that person and create trust with that person and meet them where they're at to help move them ahead. It's just not, let's get there, let's achieve the goal. How do we we have to talk about how we get to the goal. And the personal and the soft factors surrounding that, not just the technical factors. So that's my experience.
Yeah, that was exactly my answer. I think psychological safety, we're actually, I will say with my leadership team, we're still on this journey. We historically have worked in a very results-driven organization and industry, and we are still very results-driven, but we need to find a way to be more inclusive and a little bit more collaborative. And what we're focused on right now with my leadership team is developing psychological safety so that the stupid questions can be asked, the failures can be owned, and and I think, Jill, you talk quite a bit about this, the failures is the learning, right? So we've really tried to continue to stay focused on results, but balance that with the learnings of failures that come along the way. And with that, we hope to build more resilient teams and just overall better skilled professionals.
Yeah, I think also managing interpersonal relationships is really critical too. Understanding how people work, how they approach problems, and then what is the first backup thing that happens when there's a crisis? Does that person become an attacker? Does that person withdraw? Does that person get aggressive? Figuring out what that next step is when there's a crisis, recognizing it, and then realizing this is just a working style. So I remain extremely objective about what happens when the shit hits the fan and how someone behaves, and helping then to look afterwards at that situation and maybe modify or recognize some of those working style changes that occur, and managing those interpersonal relationships to build the best team possible. It's like theme anthem music happening back here, eh? It's like,
I'm glad we moved from house to this, though.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Please, can we give them a round of applause?